Welcome to episode 13 of Tales from a Disappearing City. I'm here with my old friend Brandon Spivey, ACAB. I've known you for a few years, Brandon. Where did we originally meet?
I think he was Dead by Dawn at 121.
Yeah, I met quite a few suspicious characters down in that basement and, well, obviously, the upper bit of Railton Road. I mean, we were chatting just before the recording. How would you describe yourself? If I was going to introduce you, as in what you do and what your interests are and that sort of stuff.
I have a very big interest in music, and I have since I was a kid. I wouldn't describe myself as a musicologist, a working class musicologist, and I think that academia offers a very narrow definition, of education. And I think the parameters via academia are tiny. And I think outside of that, you've got a whole culture, or many, many cultures that are very sort of studious. And, there's a wonderful history of working class self-education. So I'm a clown from Macclesfield who has a massive interest in music, and I've acted upon that. Yeah, that's it really.
Did you have a deep education, or did you go to uni or anything like that, or
Are you asking me if I'm an educated imbecile? No.
Yeah, kind of, because I left school with 2 O levels, as I believe they were called, But is it more education from the from the street?
Yeah, well, the school I went to, I got CSEs, and I got a grade 2 CSE in technical drawing, and all my mates called me a fucking creep because I got a grade 2 CSE. So, no, I didn't really have much of an education. It was a very brutal school I went to,
So, yeah, where did you go out, Brandon?
I grew up in Oldham till I was 10. My dad got made redundant in 77, and then we moved to Macclesfield. So we left a very traditional Lancashire mill town, Oldham, and then found ourselves in Cheshire, in Macclesfield, in 77.
Yeah, well, what was that shift of perspective like, going from Oldham to Macclesfield?
It was fucking weird, it was like very, very weird. It's the last year of junior school, and my dad was a fish out of water because my dad was a shop steward, and my dad was in the Cotton Workers Union back in the day, and then shop steward in an old mill. So my grandma worked in the mill as well. So I was at like an open day at the mill where my dad were there and my grandma were there, stood together. And so I come from that sort of tradition. So then when we went to Macclesfield, it was like not like that. It was very, very different. So there was a big culture shock, really. Saying that, all the people I got to know, I went to school on a council estate in Macclesfield, and it was all a very white town, whereas Oldham had a massive sort of immigrant population, and Asian, and Pakistani, Indian, Bangladeshi. There was a mosque up the street I lived in Oldham, so yeah, big change.
What about early sort of cultural or music sort of memories? What was the stuff that got you into music?
When I was a kid, I had an ear for music, and I loved ABBA. I got into ABBA as a kid, and I do remember hearing Killing Me Softly by Roberta Flack as a kid, and I remember the reverb. I was drawn to the reverb. There's a section where there's a reverb on a voice, and my mind just has these memories of sound. But ABBA, I loved ABBA, and that was a shameful thing. I went from ABBA being into the Buzzcocks, because straight to Macclesfield. It fucked me. The music there was amazing.
Well, do you know what? I loved ABBA as a kid as well. And to be honest, the Buzzcocks are like pop. They've got a good pop sensibility. Like obviously, yeah, I can see the similarities and totally between ABBA and the Buzzcocks in a way. Like maybe not at the time you wouldn't have dared to say that, but
it's funny, Neil. I mean, because of our ages and cultures we come from. When you were young, when you were in Macclesfield, if you liked anything like ABBA, you'd be seen as a fucking puff. Do you know what I mean? Like the shift in music, and like how people adhered to music was very strong, so you couldn't admit to liking, you was in denial of what you were listening to 2 weeks before.
Well, I remember that. I was really into soft cell, and I remember the kids at my school going, "What music do you like?" All the sort of tough kids. I knew I couldn't say soft cell because I would have got fucking beaten up straight away. So I think I said Human League, which was a bit more palatable, But I mean, I loved the Human League, but I mean, yeah, soft cell would have, I would have got, I would have got some serious digs for saying that in 1981.
Yeah, it was brutal. I remember hearing being boiled on the Western Estate in Macclesfield in a council house. 2 real tough kids playing at me, and one of the lads who played at me, Berkey, he died of heroin. you know, but like them lads who I was like, got to hang around with, their fucking music, man. You know, I felt very lucky because I was hanging around with kids older than me, and I was hearing the really best of the best of music, even though it might have gone in one ear and out the other, some of it. But I was hearing wonderful music, you know, and so from ABBA straight to the Buzzcocks, Slaughter and the Dogs, the Short Circuit EP, Live at the Electric Circus, you know, like the beginning of Joy Division. I mean, we were into Joy Division, but it wasn't like they had no kudos then. And my mate had the single with the An Ideal for Living. And I've just gone to an exhibition. I helped with an exhibition just last week. And they put their single out. And so my mate who had it in his council house, you know, in a poor working class background, that fucking single now is £5,000. So we had it at the exhibition, and £5,000 for a single that he paid what's nothing for, you know, and weird times, you know, the way times have changed. So
Yeah, well, there's a story when they got that. I think they took it to one of the DJs, like the Ideal for Living EP. When they were called Warsaw, more or less, wasn't it? Like,
yeah, I think it's on the verge.
yeah, or maybe they called themselves Joy Division for that record. But I remember they said they took it to this DJ and they forced him to put it on, you know, because it was their record. And so the pressing was so shit, like, you know, because obviously the DJ is playing like I think disco records, and they put their record on and sort of pressed in. Yeah, and they said they were just embarrassed and just, you know, thought, oh my God, what the fuck have we done? You know?
Yeah, laughing at it.
Yeah, I've seen it on walls of record stores for £2,500. So that's amazing, isn't it?
I mean, it's ridiculous. But that period, I was very lucky, you know, from like 77. I do remember listening to the Pistols, Jilted John, things like that. And then, like me in Macclesfield, just as I moved to Macclesfield, you know, like I say, the Short Circuit, Live at the Roxy, you know, that was an important punk album. And then there was a fantastic record that not many people know of called Streets, which was a compilation on Beggar's Banquet.
I've got that, yeah.
Is God a Man? That track called Is God a Man by Arthur Comics. Fuck me, that's better than David Bowie. That's as good as a Bowie track, that. You know, the sound and production and wow, what a track. Yeah, so I was listening to music, and a lot of the time it was like we weren't going to record shops because we didn't have any money. So we were buying stuff off the older lads who wanted money for the weekend. So, you know, I remember buying loads of Buzzcocks singles for fuck all because the lad wanted to go out at the weekend. And so there was like a trade in second-hand records amongst friends. That was at the beginning of my musical thing. That's where we bought our records. They were always second-hand. And in the middle of them, it'd always say like Shaz or Gary or, you know, somebody scratched the name in the middle, you know. So
yeah. Do you still have any of those where we've got Shaz or Gary written on, or that?
I do. I have plenty, yeah. And I'm proud of them as well because it's a bit weird as you get older and everyone reinvents the past and you hear all this like, you know, the academics taking over punk and its legacy, and it's lovely to have authentic, you know, to have gone through that period. And then it's weird that you don't realise the significance of things because you're there, you're doing it, you're living it.
Well, no, exactly. Yeah. You don't stop to think, and like, yeah, you live in the moment, which is how it should be. You can't be living in a reality from the future where you're like, wow, I'm in this time. Yeah. Well, I know people said that about Joy Division, that like, yeah, at the time, obviously they were a cult band. They were a well-regarded band and all that, but they weren't massive, you know. And like, obviously, when he killed himself, he died, and like it's almost like, you know, a few years later, the myth started to build up, and you know, they become this legendary band. And you know, like I said, they were respected at the time, and obviously amazing sound. But again, it's that thing in hindsight, people, you know, add all this momentum or like, yeah, to make it, you know, bigger than maybe it was at the time.
There's a romanticism and
romanticism.
Yeah, in Macclesfield, I mean, I don't know if Macclesfield's any different to any other town, but to be honest with you, there's loads of suicides in Macclesfield and loads of people who die. My dad committed suicide, you know. There's loads of people who die young there. I don't know, most families I know have had somebody who's died very young through addiction or through by their own hand. So when Ian Curtis died, it was like, oh, that poor family, you know, and it wasn't a fetish. And like, it's really nauseating how people glorify his destruction rather than the fact that he was he was into self-education, he was well read. And that's a really embarrassing thing. and some idiot bought his house to set up a museum, and like it's not fit for a museum. It's tiny.
Yeah.
But also, why did he not buy the house he grew up in? Why did he not buy the house that inspired him? Or I did fetch this up at a meeting with a public thing with Steve Morris was there, and we thought it's a death cult. It's ridiculous, and it's a fetishism, and it's totally not taking into account the history. The tragedies. There's too many to glorify one. You know what I mean? It's it's a shame. The fetishism with the Kurdish thing is a bit silly for those of us in Mac, because everyone's suffered one way or another through somebody passing away in the family or addiction. There has been a bad addiction problem in Macclesfield, and the person who bought Ian Curtis's house has rubbed everybody up the wrong way and gazumped a guy who was going to buy the place, a friend of ours, and the guy who's bought the house is blocking anybody who says, "What you're playing at, mate? It's the residential area. Why are you fetishising the fucking downfall of a guy rather than self-education?" So he wants to try to buy his way into the scene, obviously, and he's not going to do it that way, because the north of England's, you've got to earn your place. He's buying something, he thinks, but he won't be allowed to exist in that scene or environment because it's not cool, that is the approach.
Yeah, no, fair enough, man. I mean, I understand completely all of that. All right, so yeah, you in Macclesfield, living the dream as a kid. So yeah, so what you're listening to, like what? Because we talked about this on a few other podcasts, how people get like the music from either older brothers or friends of older brothers, that sort of thing. And yeah, it's amazing how, like, yeah, maybe like you said, you were hearing like stuff like Being Boiled and punk stuff. What other sort of early music experiences were you having round about that time? I guess we're talking like end of the 70s sort of time, or?
Yeah, 1979 to like early 80s. A lot of the older lads used to go to Wigan Casino, and my mate's older brothers, my mate used to sneak in his bedroom and pull out all these records, like records like Mandrill, and we were really ignorant scumbags, and we'd be like, "Look at these, effing this, that, and the other," and we were laughing at the record covers, whereas we were secretly admiring the cultural sophistication of the older lads. You know what I mean? But masking it by behaving like the uncultured kids we were, But so we was checking out, we were seeing great records, like the Northern scene. That influenced us as kids, because we looked up to the guys and we used to go to youth clubs. There was a place called the Fermain Boys Club, and we were going there really young, and the older lads were there, and there would be like really good dancers who would be at Wigan at weekend, and they really were good. So we'd be listening to Northern Soul, Kraftwerk, at the youth clubs, and we was into like the punk, where the early punk stuff. So like there'd be punk, everything, all the music we'd be hearing it at youth clubs maybe 2-3 times a week, because there was a lot of youth clubs, So, but the Wigan thing was big, the Northern Soul thing.
Yeah, I mean, I never really heard of Northern Soul until the end of the 80s when I was living over in West London, and I lived with a couple of Northern lads, and they basically, I've still got cassette tapes I did from then, from all these like Northern, from Northern songs that I hadn't really heard before. That, yeah, incredible. I know you got a big love of like funk and soul and all that sort of stuff, mixed up with the weird electronic sort of stuff you're into.
Yeah, I love funk. I mean, funk, I never really understood Northern Soul, if I'm honest with you, until when I heard Turning My Heartbeat Up, it blew my mind, and that was like, oh, I get it now, but, and you sent me some tapes, Neil, years ago, some Northern tapes. Well, I get Northern now, because I think back in the day I didn't grasp its cultural significance, and, a good friend of mine was the first guy to be arrested inside Wigan Casino selling amphetamines. And I must say hello to Ross Daly and Ted.
Is this an honour or something that they should put a plaque at his house? Or
I can tell you stories, like well, my mates used to pitch the barbiturates off the older lads, and I can say that I've fucking blacked out on barbs, because that was like, the old. There was a big drug thing with the Wigan thing, and as young kids, some of the kids would pinch stuff off the brothers and wonder what we were taking, and then we'd end up in fucking hospital.
Yeah, well, I know a few of the people going to the night said Rob Chemist's on the way of all the barbiturates. Yeah, I know that was a big thing back in the day because I don't believe they sold alcohol at Wigan Casino, did they? Or I think
No, I think it was just like soft drinks and
think
amphetamines.
the Paradise Garage was like that. So it's that thing of yeah, people were dancing till 8 in the morning, and I guess it was the same with the raves as well. And like they didn't have alcohol as well, but you know everyone's dancing all night till 7, 8 in the morning, just on coke and Lucozade and all that. Yeah,
Amazing, yeah. What stamina
amazing.
they've
It's
got.
just the music. All right, but yeah, yeah. I guess Northern Soul as well. I guess I don't know. Was it seen as cheesy back in the end of the 70s, or was it out of fashion then, or it was still fashionable? Like
I mean, to be honest, then it was the ultimate because the guys who were the older guys and girls, the boys' club I went to, the Fermain Boys' Club, they took a minibus down of underage kids. So they'd take a transit van down full of kids for an all-nighter. One girl I
to
met
Wigan
was
or somewhere else, or
to Wigan, yeah, to
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Wigan, yeah. And but they always dress well, you know. Like I always remember the long leather coats. That was a big deal, and the flares and the But I do remember the older Wigan, the people going to Wigan, and the Northern Soul people. That we all looked up to them because they were the older generation and they were cool. You know, it hadn't become what it has now. You know, which is like fetishized to some degree from the outside. You know, and again, there's a class issue there because back then it was authentic, and now you've got there is like a analysis of it by middle class people and things like that. You know, as that it was very authentic, and that was its magic. It was just very ordinary people, working class, wanting to dance, hearing all this black music and loving it. You know, and it was authentic. You know, so.
This is the thing with these authentic scenes. It's yeah, when you try and recreate them, that's not the way they were created. Like yeah, you couldn't sit down and imagine like this scene of like northern nightclubs going to trying to find rare black soul records from the states and then bringing them over and people dancing all night in abandoned sort of ballrooms. You know, yeah. I mean, it sounds kind of unbelievable, but yeah, it's just weird the way that stuff happens naturally.
Do you know, Neil? I mean, I've been around a lot. I've been Chicago and everywhere, you know. But I remember a guy I know in Berlin, like he was saying about Berghain, you know, that the fact that Berghain is a great building, fantastic sound system, but it's missing something. And he said he's been around a long time, and he said basically it's not what it was. So it's almost like a replica. You know, there's a dilution. You know, and people wanting to have a party, everything's there, but there's an element missing, which is the energy of when it first all started. And you know, we're very lucky, some of us, to have been through a lot of scenes and to seen the birth of dance music and stuff like that. You know, it's been a good, healthy thing.
No, for sure. I mean, I'd say in answer to the Berghain thing, I've been to Berghain a few times, and actually, I had a great time at Berghain, and it actually really reminded me of clubs in the 80s, like gay clubs in the
Yeah,
80s.
did it? Yeah,
Yeah, you know, so in one way, for me, it actually, I mean, it's like, I guess it's like anything, isn't it? Anything is like, you know, it's not as good as it used to be. It actually reminded me, I mean, I haven't been properly for about, well, probably pre-pandemic, but like, going up Panorama Bar and just hanging out, it did feel like it reminded me of clubs in the 80s, sort of gay clubs in the 80s, that sort of freedom and just sort of did have a certain vibe to it, which, you know,
yeah, good. Yeah,
yeah, obviously it's got such a massive name, Berghain. It's all that whole thing about getting in on the door and blah, blah, blah and all that. I guess it was like, you know, like the old sort of clubs, the old gay clubs of the 80s, they wouldn't allow you to take photos either because obviously they were worried they're all going to blackmail people of being in these clubs. You knew Dave Godin, didn't you, who coined the term Northern Soul? Do you want to say anything about Dave or?
yeah. I was close friends with Dave Godin, very, very close friends. I got to know him because of the Hillsborough Justice campaign. I have been active all my life. I'm a working class. I'm class conscious before I'm anarchist, you know, but I'm an anti-authoritarian working class stroke anarchist. I was involved in the Hillsborough campaign, and I went to a meeting and I met Dave in Sheffield, and Dave's close to a very good friend of mine called Izzy Facer. And I said to Dave, I heard, mate, I'm a friend of Izzy's. And he went, bloody hell. And he shook hands. And he wrote to me the next day. And so that was the start of our friendship. And I used to go and stay with Dave at his house.
Do you want to just explain who he was for people who don't know, like who Dave Godin was and why he sort of, you know, how he's linked with Northern Soul?
Well, Dave Godin was the man who set up the Motown Appreciation Society, and he was invited by Berry Gordy from Motown to go over to Detroit. And Dave set up the Tamla Motown label. He said you should put the Tamla label together in Motown. So Tamla Motown was something that Dave was involved with. Dave used to choose singles for Motown. When he first went to Motown, all the artists made a record for him. I've got a copy, a 7-inch, where everybody, including Stevie Wonder, says it's been really good to meet Dave. And so Dave set up the Motown Appreciation Society, like the fan club. And Dave coined the term Northern Soul because a lot of Northerners used to go to his record shop in London. And what he did is he wrote on a cardboard box, Northern Soul, because the footy guys, the likes of Ted Colston and all these people, would go up and buy records. I'm not sure if Ted went. But basically, it was the Northerners liked a certain amount of soul, so he wrote it on a box. The next thing you know, people started writing about it, and the Northern clubs would be playing a certain sort of soul. So Dave articulated Northern Soul, and he's credited with coining the phrase, basically. So basically, I was at a meeting, I met him, and he dropped me, he said, give me your address, and he wrote to me a really beautiful letter the next day. So like 2 days later, I got a letter off Dave. We started hanging out together, and I would go over to his house, and it was just beautiful. Like Dave was an expert on film censorship, and he used to write a lot for the Internet Movie Database about censorship. He used to run a cinema called the Anvil Cinema. So I'd go to Dave's house. He'd make a fantastic meal, and we'd watch films, and we'd stay up till all hours, literally till 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. And when he was compiling the Deep Soul Treasures, I've been at his house and he's playing me DAT tapes of tracks that were going to be on the Deep Soul Treasures. And it was just lovely being with him because he's an older guy, he was gay and working class, and he was always calling people a cunt. You know, he didn't fuck about. And what was really nice and what was beautiful was he was very flamboyant, and I realised he had no fear. He had no fear of being a gay guy. He had no fear of being articulate, you know, and expressing himself and his love of music. If ever you were with Dave watching a film, if you spoke, he'd fucking go berserk. You know what I mean?
Yeah, good man. Good man. I like that. Yeah, exactly.
When he was listening to music, it was like he was being receiving a love letter. You know, like the look on his face and everything. He was like, fuck me, did he absorb it? So he was a great friend, you know. And I've got loads of letters. There's a book come out by Steve Stevler, and there's some letters in there published that Dave wrote me that's in the book. But yeah, he was a very good friend and a working class Londoner, you know. And yeah, I don't know what to say about him. You
No,
know,
that's fine.
Dave Godin,
Isn't it a bit
yeah.
ironic, like a working class gay Londoner coins the term Northern Soul?
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
Got to give the Southerners some credit, Neil.
Yeah, exactly. I know. You did actually play me that record, the Motown fan club record, where they all say, and that is amazing, that 7-inch, where it's like people like Marvin Gaye saying, "Oh yeah, it's really lovely to meet Dave," and all this sort of stuff. And as you said, I think Berry Gordy got them all to meet all the stars to meet him outside
Yeah.
Motown in Detroit when he turned up, didn't they?
When I was at Dave's once, he's actually passed me the original telegram that Gordy sent him. So I've actually held the telegram in my hand that Berry Gordy sent him. It was like a really old-fashioned document, you know, really weirdly printed. So I've actually held that in my hand at Dave's, you know, and you know, it's a really beautiful thing, you know.
Yeah. Sorry, what telegram was that, Brandon? That was.
Berry Gordy inviting Dave over to
Oh, that was the
Motown.
invitation. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Yeah. What else at the time, or early 80s? Did you start going out to some clubs then, Brandon, or some nights, or you were going to the youth clubs, but were there other sort of things going on?
There was a period where I was totally into punk. I'd go to a club in Manchester, a place called the Mayflower Club. It's called the Funhouse. Joy Division played there, and I never saw them, but it was a punk venue, real shithole. But we used to go see all the early oi bands and skinhead bands. But as regards clubbing, fucking hell, man, yeah, I was hanging around with all the lads. And I was going to clubs when I was like 13. How the fuck I got in, I'll never know. And but there was like the place called DeVille's, which was a cool club, and we'd go to a place called Legends. We'd go when the Hacienda was open. We'd go to the Hacienda like midweek. My mate Dogface is called Doggy had a car, a Zodiac car, and there'd be 3 of us in the front, 5 in the back, and we was into amphetamines quite young, you know. So we'd go to the Ritz as well, a club called the Ritz. Manchester Ritz is a famous place. John Cooper Clarke did a fantastic poem about it. Salome Maloney, Queen of the Ritz, sequins on her arse and tassels on her tits. So we'd go to the Ritz, and that's where we started buying speed. And then, well, we'd go like the Hacienda loads, but all these places have no kudos. You know, they were, we went, and we'd go to the Hacienda, and there'd be nobody there. And
well, no, I went to the Hacienda in the 84, 85, and yeah, like I said, it was fucking empty.
Beautiful building. Yeah, beautiful.
It was actually great, but it was actually freezing in there because they'd have all the dry ice, and it'd be like no one fucking in there.
Yeah.
And the giant picture of Tony Wilson as you went in was what I remember.
Yeah, it's unsettling. Yeah,
yeah, looking like a total cunt on the door. But you know, God bless Tony Wilson. But yeah, fucking hell.
That period there wasn't much happening, and people, you know, that the 80s, say 82 onwards, it was quite grim and bleak. You know, the what did come out of that, the deindustrialised Manchester, was great music, but I do always say that the only thing Manchester did was export cynicism, because if you listen to the music, you know, you've got the Smiths, you know, you had the Smiths, fucking grim as fuck, but sort of amusing. You know, John Cooper Clarke, Joy Division, but all of it was quite cynical.
Yeah, why didn't you just make happy music up north, Brandon?
Yeah. You know, yeah.
Well, you haven't mentioned, didn't you talk about like the Russell Club, or was it PSV, or what was that place?
I got kicked out of house when I was 16 because I wouldn't go on a YTS scheme. So I was squatting in Macclesfield, and so we were squatting and we causing a lot of trouble. Prince Charles came to Macclesfield, and I managed to get within a few feet of him with a banner that said "Eat the Rich," and I called him a fucking parasite. And we got into a lot of trouble, basically. I could go on tell you a lot about it, but we ended up moving to Manchester, first in a place called Fort Hardwick, which was fucking seriously grim. It made you look like Bath in Bristol compared to fucking Beirut, you know.
Right. And you're from Oldham and Macclesfield, yeah.
In Hume, there was a place called the Russell Club, or the PSV Club, the Public Service Vehicles Club. It's a Caribbean club. It was the original factory where Wilson put on, you know, various bands, the factory night. Well, yeah, when we squatting in Hume, the PSV Club was where we used to go, basically, like all the time. You know, that was a big venue, and it's got quite a name now. It has quite a history. It played a big role.
Tell us a bit about it then, because I've only heard like a few sort of, you know, other secondhand sort of things, but not much about going inside it or what it was like.
There was like 2 floors. I mean, I used to go in because you could drink. I was alcoholic. When everyone was going up, I was crashed down, and I got sober in '89. But around that period, you could drink there till 2 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, you haven't drunk since 1989, have you, Brandon? Like,
no, I haven't. No, I mean, we did it. We did all the acid and everything.
Yeah, no. You filled it up before then, so now you can. No, fair play, man. Well done for that. Yeah, but yeah, go on then. Yeah, back to PSV.
It was a good drinking den, basically, and it was all full of like Caribbean people, and they'd be like Lovers Rock. So if you went in on a Wednesday night, you could have a drink till 2 o'clock. You get some chicken and fucking what have you, and but there'd be like Lovers Rock on, you know, and then there'd be bands play occasionally, like punk bands. There was a night on at weekend. There was like discos and things like that, and some really good music. But the actual building was a great, you know, it was a great building, and a lot of them places back in the day. Like there was a Shabim opposite. I used to go to a Shabim there, Caribbean. You know, it's a flat squatted by all these old Jamaican guys, and they'd welcome you. You'd go in and have a drink. And
yeah, was it mixed racially? Was it mixed racially, or the club and the Shabim? Or
yeah, definitely. In the PSV, I think all the staff were Caribbean, and in Hume at that period. Like I was there in '85, I moved there in '85. There was an unofficial taxi rank there, so it was just all these Caribbean guys, all these old chaps with knackered old cars, and they'd take you wherever you wanted to go. It's an unofficial taxi rank, and they'd queue up in the cars. no badges, no nothing. And I remember I used to pay them in fucking lead and stuff like that, Morocco. I was a dope head. And you could get around town by this unofficial taxi rank. And so you had the squatters, you had pubs where the dominoes were played. You had different pubs in the area and different places. But looking back now, it was actually there was some very pleasant bits, but there was a lot, like crack arrived there and fucking hell, it got really heavy. There were shootings and I knew the guys who, yeah, I don't know what to say. It was an heavy area, but there was loads of music. The Rastas would go on the roofs with speakers. So you'd have like Rastas blasting out fucking reggae in summer. Police wouldn't go anywhere near you because the way the flats were constructed, things could be thrown down on the police and it was like a no-go area. I don't think I ever once saw police in Hume.
Yeah, what was the big estate there? Wasn't there a big estate there, or was it like a few different estates?
No, well, it was Hume, that was the estate. And
Yeah,
there was
okay, all right. Yeah.
a place called the Crescents,
Okay.
which comically were based on the Bath Crescents.
Okay.
But they were fucking made of concrete. They were fucking awful. So the Crescents is where a lot of people hung out, the Stone Roses. Smiths did videos there. Steve Coogan's done footage there. There was loads of stuff went on around the Crescents. I remember the Stone Roses before they even started. They started graffitiing everywhere, and we'd see Stone Roses graffiti in Hume. You'd see it in Manchester, and you'd be like, "Who are these fucking wankers?" And they'd be there. It was like an area where you could squat and get away with it, and that was it. And it was a no-go area for the police.
So after PSV, what? So you and Legends and stuff like that.
Yeah, Legends was a cool place. It was cool. It's funny because it's starting to be written about it. It's apparently had the best sound system and the best light show in England, some people say. So we used to go to a night there and they'd play like Iggy Pop, Banshees, I Feel Loved on a Summer, Giorgio Moroder. It was like a real mixture of music and the sound system was fantastic. So there was all kinds of nights there. There was like electro nights, but that wasn't my bag, That was at that time, that was the proper black kids music.
Yeah, I know Greg Wilson did the electro nights there. Yeah. I think he was one of the DJs there.
But the club itself was stunning, and we was into speed and it was a great club. We'd go there and then go off somewhere after. And but the sound system was wonderful. The atmosphere was good, cheap to get in, all them clubs, like the Ritz, for example, that's a very old-fashioned dance hall that goes back 100 and so many years, and sprung dance floor, balconies, 3 or 4 bars, brilliant building. So yeah, you could write every night of the week, to be honest with you, and if you could afford it, because that's why we took speed, because it was cheap. You know what I mean? And we looked at coke back then as like a wanker's drug, because it was someone showing off that they had that amount of money.
Yeah, well, speed is like working class coke, or maybe not anymore. Maybe coke is more working class now. Yeah,
that's ridiculous. Yeah.
How long were you living in Manchester in the 80s?
I think I was there from 84 to about 89. I think something like that. I think in 89 I moved to Leeds in 89.
I mean, while all this is going on, I think you would describe yourself, if you don't mind me saying, as a hooligan at points. Yeah, would you say that? Or
yeah, proudly, yeah,
gladly, yeah. So, like, how would you describe, what that means, like in the 80s? Like, I don't think you'd see it as a bad term, would you?
I mean, they used to call people like me rent-a-mob. We'd rent a mob, and we have a laugh about that. And we used to describe each other. He's a man twisted by hate, and we'd have a giggle and a laugh. We had a problem with authority. Like I was arrested from being 12 years of age. I was beaten up by the police. I've been arrested with me. I got battered by the police when I was 13. My dad come down the police station and he said, "What the fuck have you done to him?" And they then arrested my dad. So I've actually been banged up with my dad. I get battered by the police. They arrest me fucking dad. Like I ended up with really feeling authority, really feeling the boot of it. And I became sort of politicised with like the miners' strike, and so we did a lot of strike support. And for example, when there was a strike for the Wapping, whenever we saw a TNT van in Manchester, his windows would just go through. We just smashed his fucking windows, and we'd go to riots, demonstrations, and we were always looking for opportunities to get stuck in. So basically, I've had problems with special branch, and I'm one of the people, a witness against special branch officers in the Mitten inquiry. So I have no secrets. But we were hooligans, and we liked fighting and rioting, and beating up the Nazis, attacking police, Yeah.
I will say that, isn't it? You've been anti the Nazis, anti the fascists all your life, really. You've been anti the police and the authority and the injustice, really.
Neil, these days, like I've put National Front people in hospital. I've been involved in serious assaults, and I've enjoyed it. And it's kind of amusing now. What gets called fascist is like, what the fuck, you know what I mean? It's like, yeah, people who fought the fascists in the 80s and 90s helped keep our communities safer. You know what I mean? It was really, the score there,
Yeah, I mean, again, I wouldn't say violence is a solution, but I say sometimes it's necessary. Yeah, that's what I'd say to that if you get my drift. Yeah. But yeah, like you said, you've had a long history with the police. There's probably some stuff we can't really go into, but yeah, you've been consistent in your ACAB opinions.
Without a doubt. I mean, in the beautiful thing about, say, the 80s period, all squats everywhere, there was all the European scene as well. So, like, I would go to Amsterdam a lot, and there was a club there called the Van Cry, which was fantastic. So it was run by squatters, and you'd see the crash helmets there of the autonomists, and there was a movement called the autonomists, and they were like the Black Bloc. And they had their own clubs, like the place called the Van Cry in Amsterdam. That's where I was listening to electronic body music. So you'd go to riots, strike, pirate. We were on pirate radio a number of times. I went down to Bavaria. I've been involved in loads of Black Bloc stuff, I've really been involved in some big riots in Europe. But the Van Cry was an amazing venue, fantastic venue, great sound system. So there was all these like European places, like I went to Berlin when the wall was up. And yes, but there was a whole subculture, there was like unemployed people, all the Interrail tickets, you could get an Interrail ticket for 20 quid forged, and people were going to Europe who were like on the margins, like there's a whole culture there of.
Yeah, I mean, I remember the first time when we were touring around Germany in the early 90s, sort of, and touring around loads of squats in Germany, and all the squats were better venues than we had in the bloody UK. Like all the squats, they were more organised, they had better system, they had proper sound engineers doing stuff, and they were way better venues than the so-called legal ones over in the UK. When you first start getting into more like the electronic sort of stuff, like you said, you were into like the punk and Northern Soul and all that, but
yeah, well, the Skinner, the Oi, and all that. And I heard like Throbbing Gristle when I was younger. A friend of mine, Gaz Swindles, he has a fantastic record shop called Takes You Back. It's massive. Gaz turned me on to say Throbbing Gristle, and I like that Hamburger Lady and things like that. And then I heard Magic Fly by Space in 1977, and that blew my mind, So that was a record that sort of got my ears going. And then I heard Nag 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 when it came out, Cabaret Voltaire, and that was just incredible. To this day, it's one of my favourite records. And then I was listening to a lot of psychedelic music like Steve Hillage, Gong, stuff like that, Tangerine G, Klaus Schultz. That was part of psychedelia, doing drugs, doing acid and all that. But then so my ears were, I was hearing all that stuff, and then I heard the Detroit music, via my mates at Eastern Bloc, and that was incredible. Yeah.
So, shall we bring up Eastern Bloc now? Because I know you went there in the early days, or you knew a lot of the people from there. Or do you want to talk about Eastern Bloc?
Comically, there was a guy here. I won't say his second name. A lad called Sean, and we was around a lot of dope dealing. Like we knew. And Sean said to me, Brandon, you fancy I've got to drop an ounce of ash off in town. So I went into a market stall in a place called Affleck's Palace and dropped off. He wanted somebody to go with him in case of any trouble. You'll love this, Neil. So we dropped this ash off, and I got talking to Mick. There's a guy called, people don't know about this, but there's a guy called Mick Power. He was the founder of Eastern Bloc. Martin Price, who set up 808 State, and Mick Power. And I became friends with Mick. We just clicked. So he dropped this ash off, and me and Mick got talking because we had mutual friends in Bolton. And the Eastern Bloc lads, like Martin and Mick, they used to call the squatters from you the mudmen of Flash Gordon because they were right scruffy bastards, you know. And they looked like they just walked out of a cave wall, you know. So behind their backs, they were called the mudmen, and they'd say, "How do you know the mudmen?" and stuff like that. You know? So that was funny. So there was a whole subculture of, to be honest with you, there were posh kids of these mudmen, and but they liked to sort of like live in a squat, and you know they enjoyed it. They enjoyed the life.
Well, yeah,
you know,
nothing's changed there. There's still a bit of the Jar Jeremy's about. Yeah.
yeah. So I knew the Eastern Bloc crew before the Detroit stuff started arriving, and then it was a market stall, and then it went downstairs to become the first Eastern Bloc shop. And I remember going in and seeing like a box that big with imports in, literally that big.
Do you know what sort of year this was, Brandon? Do you know what years we're talking about here?
Well, like 86, 87,
Yeah.
or to my mind, you know, because I was pretty.
No, I mean, look, I know it's a long time. Like whenever I ask for dates, I know it's always. To be honest, anyone watching this, give or take a few years, because we're all old people now when we're talking about the 80s, and like, you know, who knows, it could be 86, 87 or whatever. But yeah, round about then anyway, that's cool.
But again, we can date our lives through record releases. I certainly can, into the month, some stuff.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, look on Discogs.
But basically what happened was, like Eastern Blocs, they used to sell all punk records, all sorts of records, and then the Detroit stuff arrived, and I heard this record, and I went to Mick's house in Bolton, and I woke him up one night, banged on his door, Mick, play me some of that fucking music. And he's like, fucking hell, what are you doing here, you cunt? And by his bed, he had some 1210s. And he literally played me Interference by Model 500. And I was like, fucking hell, Mick, you've got to do me a tape. And so Mick, when I saw Mick back in Manchester, I went down the shop, and he had a tape for me, a Macclesfield gold tape. I still got it. And it had a nude photo on it. It had Machines, Lauren X. It had Interference, Electronic from the Model 500 EP. And I know a lot of people who don't know the Interference EP, but for me, it was like, it blew my fucking mind. And I remember where I was literally to the foot of when I put the Walkman on, the cassette Walkman, and I heard like Nude Photo, and then they were great times. And I knew Mick well. We went to Amsterdam together. I think we went to Van Cry together, and yeah, great. You know, they were good lads. And Martin, I got to know Martin, who, you know, was 808 State prior to 808 State. You know, and you know, it was a great people. You know, and it was a really good scene, and but very small. And there were people laughing at the music at the time. You know, people would laugh at it. And one journalist wrote, "Why the fuck would you want to go out and listen to synthesizers farting?" You know, that was what they said. And then that same journalist, 2 years later, declaring themselves an expert on fucking dance music.
I mean, there was a lot of that at the time. I guess that's always been the way. But yeah, there was certainly a lot of time in the rave sort of thing of people slagging the music off, and then a year later they're, you know, dancing with their top off.
One of the things with the early acid scene for me was that it was very working class, and all the people into it were like Perry boys and casual dressers, and it was a really great change from the psychedelic music we were listening to, which had that hippie vibe.
Can you explain what a Perry boy is for those who don't know?
Perry boy was like a football casual. They were Fred Perry, and in Manchester and in Liverpool, the Perry boys, they were the tough kids who controlled the streets, really. They were mob-handed. They always dressed well. And when we were young punks, for example, if we went into an area where they were, they'd kick fuck out of us. And I've been with a gang of 20 skinheads and punks going into Manchester in the Arndale Centre. We were fucking surrounded by like 50. I always seemed to be 50 or 70 of them. And they tried to batter us, but they used to wear really shit shoes. We'd wear steel toe cap boots. And we used to take the piss out of their shoes.
What were their shoes? I want to know what shoes they wore.
They wear things like pods and fucking kickers and, you know, the shoe of the time, you know.
I'd say, yeah, kickers. I don't mind the kickers, but they're probably not brilliant for, funny enough, kicking someone's head in with some kickers. Yeah.
I got right into kickers. I've worn a lot of kickers since then.
Or what,
yeah.
You had the steel toe caps on?
So we had a kicking off a few Perry boys, but it was a whole culture. There's a great film called Casuals, which goes on about looks at the football clothes, the way the hooligans in the north of England, the Scousers and the Manx, were going to football matches in Europe. They were going out shoplifting and fetching all this Lacoste taquina back, and that's what kicked off the sportswear culture, which is big business now.
Well, I've got a big love for them clothes, Brandon.
Yeah, you certainly have, Neil. Yeah, that film Casuals, if you've not seen it, it's fantastic. Great documentary. One of the things with the Manchester scene and all that, because I was there before it happened and all that, it was very down to earth and very working class. And when it started to kick off, I remember going into Eastern Bloc and looking through the window, and the number of lads you'd see around the counter trying to get the records. It was like a beautiful thing to see. This passion that came from music. It was really beautiful. And yeah, it was it was a very fantastic time. I remember when the Flares started again, the Happy Mondays. I never liked the Mondays. And for example, the Hacienda, for many of us, the Hacienda failed because it mixed guitar music with acid and techno, and we thought that was like blasphemy. We was hearing these really pure records, and then the idea you put a fucking guitar in on a record was like, what the fuck? So people praised the Hacienda, but for some of us, it was like it was cheesy as fuck.
Yeah, no, I can understand that. I wasn't really into the Magister stuff. I didn't mind Happy Mondays. I could see the vibe more of them. I was never really into the Stone Roses. I mean, there's reasons for that. But yeah, I'm with you. I was more into the electronic music. I was more into going to a club. To be honest, I didn't give a fuck about the guitar bands then. To be honest, that was kind of dead to me. And it was a bit like some of them bands, like we had it sort of down south as well, where it was just like, yeah, suddenly now you're getting into fucking raves. I didn't give a fuck about the guitar music then. I'd rather go out to a club and hear weird fucking house music or techno all night long. I didn't want to hear another guitar solo or trying to pretend they're from the 1960s.
I have a tape from that period because some shitty journalist said the next thing you know, they've been dancing to car alarms. And I have a tape that says car alarm music on it, because we liked it perverse, but they were mocking the acid house and the techno and everything, so.
Well, yeah. Well, as soon as they mock it, then you're onto a fucking winner, don't you?
Yeah. I had an MC202 that came from a smash and grab in Macclesfield. And when Martin started making music, Martin Price, we were talking, and I said, do you want to lend it? I've got a few things, a DX100. And he said, DX100's too modern. He said, I wouldn't mind lending the MC202. And I lent him the MC202, back in the day. And people lent each other equipment. And we used to go to a flat in Hume that had a space echo. And we'd get stoned and just fuck about on the space echo. I'd pay him a few quid. And yeah, the music scene was fantastic, and there was a shop in Manchester called Johnny Roadhouses, which is still there, and you could buy really good gear there, second-hand stuff. And so, yeah, the culture, I don't know, there was something that was very working class, very poor, and something really authentic and real about people sharing equipment. And in Manchester, that goes back a long way, because there was a cooperative in Manchester I can't think of the name of it offhand, but that goes back to the early 70s. And a lot of the punk people like Bruce Mitchell from the Jurity column, who they used to call Mr. Manchester before Tony Wilson got called it, they were involved in cooperative events and cooperative sound systems. And, it's nice that Manchester does have a history of cooperative use of equipment.
What do you think of Tony Wilson? What's your opinion of Tony Wilson?
One of the things is that there's some people who say that the factory people were up their own arses and took themselves too seriously, where there was so much happening outside of that. And one example of that is the Slaughtering the Dogs and Martin Hannett before he joined Factory. The name will come to me, but there was labels going on, Rabid Records, that was it, Rabid Records. So some people say that Factory tried to define Manchester, or Factory was used to define Manchester when there was a lot more going on outside of that. I think Tony Wilson was a good bloke, and I think he did some really good work. He put the Pistols on. The first time the Pistols were on TV was in Manchester, and that really did fire a lot of people up. And he risked his job by putting his neck on the line, by putting the Pistols on TV, putting Iggy Pop on TV. So he was a good man. He used his position well. Factory, there's a really funny record done by Section 25, and the beautifully made record. And a journalist said, this record is like finding a dog turd in a silk purse. And that's Section 25, because the production of the packaging and the thinking was absolutely beautiful. And Factory was like, if I'm honest, I only like maybe 3 or 4 Factory records, so they put out lots of records, but the style over the content, is a big deal, so Factory inspired things like Factory Benelux. One of my favourite artists to this day is Wim Mertens, who was on Factory Benelux, This Decrepit School, and Econo's label. So, I mean, what Tony Wilson did, even if he opened ground, he broke ground that people followed or went off and did their own thing. So in a way, like McLaren did, Malcolm McLaren has his critics, but what he did was very inspirational, and Tony Wilson was the same. And if you look at what his position was there, but then what he went on, all the directions, like Factory Benelux, This Decrepit School, yeah, he played a good role.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, I think there should be a statue of him in Manchester. But like, again, I can see him being this divisive sort of person. He's a bit like the Alan Partridge, putting out like this amazing sort of music. And like you said, he's the first one to put the Sex Pistols on the So It Goes, I believe his show was called.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Yeah, and like, have you ever seen the whole show? Or have you just seen, have you ever seen the whole show, like where the Sex Pistols are on?
Yeah, I saw it back in the day, I think, Neil, back in when it was on.
Because the whole show, they have like literally, I think Peter Cook's on it with Clive James.
Yeah.
And there's another 2 bands who are just absolutely fucking shit mid-70s. And then at the end, the Pistols come on, and like it is like night and day. And for all the cliche about all the sort of punk stuff, I do think the clip of like Rotten at that one when he starts it with "Get up off your ass" and just starts fucking screaming, and you got Jordan throwing stuff at the side of the stage. Yeah, I think he was pretty brave to put that on Tony Wilson. It's like someone like Richard Madeley putting on some fucking drill act on mainstream TV now.
I don't know if you know, but Richard Madeley was on TV with Tony Wilson. And when Tony Wilson died, Richard Madeley did a really cool piece about him, which is hard to believe, but it was quite good. Neil, I've just made the Crass film. I made a film called Crass, The Sound of Free Speech, and we've put that clip in, "Get Off Your Ass," that's in the film. And I almost wanted to put an obligatory Tony Wilson clip, because at the end of the day, what Tony Wilson did was a really big deal. It was a big deal, and it's affected all our lives one way or another. We're talking now because of punk one way or another. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, I went up to Manchester. I visited you up in Manchester like a few years ago, or well, probably 2 years ago now, whatever it was, for the Factory exhibition, wasn't it? We went to.
Yeah, it was.
Remember where that was? I can't remember where it was. I'm actually looking at the poster you purloined for me on the wall. Yeah, the Science and History Museum. It was. Yeah, and yeah, there was a lot of good stuff in there, wasn't there?
It was. I thought it was fantastic. I really did. But the thing is, it's about pride as well, because like we am up the northern thing, because in a way the north just has the piss taken out of it, and we don't, as regards like tax and what money comes back to the north. As regards the arts, there's not a lot comes back here, and we are proud of the north, and what comes out of the north. And if you were to talk about techno, then you start talking about Bradford, Sheffield, the bleak techno. There's some really shit northern towns, really poor, rundown places. Have been really inspirational in really creative in the dance scene. So the north to us is a special place, and we just want its name known, and the fact that, hang on a minute, we want credit for what what as a region we've contributed.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, I think Manchester, Blackburn, Leeds, Sheffield, Bradford, yeah, all them cities, and I'm not in I'm missing, I'm sure I'm missing cities out, but yeah, no, 100%, they had as much as the for the acid house, techno, rave sort of scene going on as much as down south. Big up the north.